presentation from Virginia Tech. Jonathan, you and Miss Carol all right this morning? I haven't heard a single word out of you guys.
Oh yeah, we're doing.
Yeah, Carolyn was talkative until you connected, and then she got quiet. I think.
I know. I don't mean to take the fire out of her flame there. I didn't even do that.
Oh no.
John, did you say you were cold?
Yeah, it was, well, this morning it was cold.
Yeah.
There was frost, a lot.
It was about the heaviest frost that I've seen as I drove down this morning. So
I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was supposed to be warmer, like 4 degrees warmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be warmer this afternoon, and I think warm tomorrow. But after that, it's going to get kind of blustery and wintry for Saturday and Sunday. So it'll do that when I have to go get a load of Christmas trees.
Channel 6 or Channel 12 news or something. It's having like a little contest. It's like whoever has the picture of like the first snow gets like a $10 gift card. Whoever sends it in.
Yeah, I saw that one. It'll be interesting. Tom will probably witness it on his way to your area.
Yeah. Oh no, because it's supposed to be colder my way, just because I'm closer to the mountains than y'all are.
Okay.
So theoretically, I would see more bad weather than y'all do here. But ironically enough, that has not been the case. Only one time in my 13+ years have I had weather at the house that we didn't have weather here in Alberta. And what happens, just the way the topography, the way it works out for me is sometimes we'll get snow there in Marshall, Henry County, Pittsburgh, but just the way the temperature is, y'all are a little bit closer to the coast, just a little bit warmer, and y'all end up getting ice. Y'all get ice and stuff like that sometimes when we're just getting snow or something like that, and it's been strange. I've been surprised.
I'm surprised.
The weather's a lot of times been worse here than it's been at home.
Like in Virginia Beach, this is my first year.
And a couple of times in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot more snow at Alberta than what we got here.
Yeah.
When I used to go to school in South Hill, and my mom's a teacher. She was working at the school at Blackstone, and she'd be out, and I'd have to go to school in South Hill. Just because it was a different climate, microclimate.
Yeah, microclimate. Good vocabulary there.
Yeah.
I took all the time.
Yes. Well, so I get. Did we talk microclimate in this class or the plant class? Okay, because it's been in one of these classes this semester. So.
It quite often comes out in all the classes I have one way or another, because you're talking about specific conditions in a single location. So it's okay. What I'm going to try to do this morning is to skate through the rest of this PowerPoint presentation. I did talk to Melanie, and we're good to go for the testing process here. Did Dixie make any inroads into the testing process for you guys? Tom, do you know?
I haven't heard back yet. She's gonna contact the people, but
that's fine. Well, we're doing it early enough. We've got a little bit of leeway, so we should be good.
That reminds me, Jennifer Adkins. Hi, Jennifer. She already has her personal pesticide license.
Okay.
So I didn't know. Do you need her to send a copy of it? So as far as grade wise, are you counting as a grade?
No. We don't need it. As long as you can justify that she's got it, we'll be good with that. That's not a problem.
Okay.
And I don't know about Timothy Atwood. I don't know what he's going to want to do. I need to probably send him an email and see what he'll want to do.
Yeah. If you know when the agent's going to be giving the test for your group, he might be. I don't know what his schedule is, but maybe you can see if he can crash with y'all.
Okay. I do know when that's going to be. It's going to be on the Monday the 20th. And we'll do it here in this classroom, which is 215 of West Hall.
That's next Monday, right?
and I'll try to make a point to contact him.
Okay, do you know
what question?
What time Monday?
10:15, 10:30, normal class time.
Oh, okay, so for the rest of us, we're not gonna have class next Monday. Is that
No, we will not have class,
Okay.
7 more Fridays and it's Christmas.
7 more Fridays till Christmas, okay. Good to know.
That's really comforting to know.
So y'all got that no class, this class, not next Monday?
Okay.
So no
What's going on?
We don't have classes Tuesday.
Oh.
Monday is the only day next week Southside has classes. It's just Monday.
It's like, let's do that Monday and then till next.
Yeah.
We got class.
Yeah.
Okay, so it starts on Tuesday.
Yeah, but I'm gonna be evil, you know what? No, I'm gonna have the marketing class Monday afternoon, so sorry.
No, that's fine.
And which if y'all want, y'all can come to my law class to make up for not having this class. You can just sit in on that.
And when
That's above and beyond normal punishment there to do that to you.
You ain't lying. But
Yeah, we'll go hunting on Monday. Hunting on Monday morning.
oh, go ahead. Kill something.
All right, we'll get started on doing this slideshow, and if you have an issue or question, I think I have got another monitor going in the back of the room, so if you can wave or flag at me if you've got a question. Otherwise, we'll just try to force through this and get through it as quickly as we can. So.
Yes.
Okay.
I have my prepared sign now, so we're ready.
All right, that's fine. But I'm gonna switch it over and I'll lose the audio from you, but maybe we can go on. Okay, I'm gonna back up just one slide. We're talking about an IPM or integrated pest management, and it involves the biological, cultural, mechanical, and chemical means of controlling pests. It's using different tactics to control pests tends to cause the least disruption to living organisms and other surrounding things surrounding a treatment site. Sanitation, food, and water supply control, host resistance are key parts of IPM management. And the sanitation component is a key as we talk about that, because you want to eliminate sources of potential pest and disease. I've seen greenhouse situations where a greenhouse grower might finish up with his crop and just walk away and leave the residual plant materials in there for a period of time, and you get all sorts of problems to build up in a greenhouse. You'll get aphids and thrips and white flies and other cucumber beetles and things that will build populations up in there, and you will have to fight them for an extended period of time when you begin to go back in there. So sanitation, eliminating those potential locations is a real key to this. I was reading a thing at home the other night talking about a fruit fly, and that is a real problem on soft fruits anymore. And it's they were talking about recommended that peach growers that had off-grade peaches, they recommended burying them 2 feet in the ground so you didn't have the potential of that as a source of populations of these fruit flies that are tremendously damaging to soft fruit. So that's just an example of sanitation that we talk about. Common cultural control methods include crop rotation, cultivation, adjusting row width, fertilization, and the timing of planting. These seem like common elements that we talk about, different things, but they dramatically affect the number of pests that we have to deal with. And as an example, we talk about the timing of planting. Sweet corn is a unique crop in that if you plant it early, quite often you can harvest a crop before the corn earworm becomes a major damaging factor. You just get your corn in early, and the corn earworm really doesn't become a major issue until after the 4th of July in our area. So if you can get your sweet corn in early, you'll get that crop off before the 4th of July, and you don't have the invasion of the corn earworm. So that's an example of a cultural control. Biological controls include methods by which the pest is biologically altered. Examples may include releasing sterile males or the use of pheromones. Now, we haven't talked a lot about pheromones, but pheromones are basically, for lack of a better way of describing it, they are aromas that insects and some animals emit so that we will they'll be able to proceed with the breeding process. Right now we're in the early stages of the deer season, and deer, the female deer emits a pheromone that is an attractant to the male, just as an example. So he talks about releasing sterile males as a biological control. That is a scientific approach that's been used on several different types of insects. And the great berry moth is one example of that. And there's been a lot of work done. Berry moth is a real small little moth that will affect the individual berries on a grape plant, and they're just the devil to control, because by nature the fertile female will lay an egg on an individual berry in a grape cluster. And you would think that would be a fairly easy type thing to control, but when that egg hatches, the little larva that emerges from that does not come out externally. Since it's laid that little egg on a berry, when it emerges, it goes into the berry. It never is exposed to the outside world. So that's one of the mechanisms that they're using, is to release a sterile male which mates with the female, and then the offspring is a sterile egg. So you essentially lose that reproductive population. That's just an example of one of the things. There's been a lot of work done with pheromones on the attempted control of great berry moth. You administer an extraordinary volume of aroma into the vineyard, and the male moth is confused by all the aroma of the females, and he has a horrible time mating with the female to create an offspring. So they're just examples of types of biological control. It says some pests are more easily killed at certain stages of growth. The change of the body form during the life cycle is called a metamorphosis. The housefly stages of metamorphosis are an egg, a larva, a pupa, and an adult. And that's a typical metamorphosis cycle. One way that we can tell a mite from an insect is an insect has 6 legs where a mite has 8 legs. A mite is just, they often call them spider mites because it has 8 legs. They are little small sucking insects that are tremendously damaged to certain plant species. Apples are very have very adverse effects from European red mite. There's also a population of 2-spot mites because the actual structure of the little critter has 2 little spots on its back. And they have a tremendous detrimental effect on strawberries. A miticide controls mites. That's what we're talking about. And you'll see this quite often. The word gives you an indication as to the type of control mechanism that occurs.
Spiders fall under mites?
Spiders are controlled by miticides. They have 8 legs. That's a mite. A tick can be controlled by a miticide, and so can a chigger. You ever had a chigger?
Yes.
Never heard of that before.
Oh, Tyler, you've led a sheltered life.
You ain't lying.
Get out
A
the woods.
chigger is a extremely small insect that will fall upon the tender white flesh of us individuals. Used to get the greatest problem with them when I was picking blackberries. They're quite prevalent about late May, June, early July in brushy, thick areas, and you'll get them on your pant legs, and you won't think you've had any problem at all until 10 to 12 hours later, and you begin to get this sensation that you've got something itching. And quite often there'll be a predominant number of them around where your socks were, the top of the layer of your socks, or where creases in your pants were. They're really prominent around little restricted areas like where elastic from your shirt sleeve might be. But mites some people are really adversely affected by them, and they'll affect some people. Some people taste better to them than others. My sister, when we would go out, if I took her, I didn't have to worry about chiggers bothering me because she attracted them. So.
What are those little red insects that, well, I don't know if they're insects or mites, that sit on ragweed during the summer? What are those things?
I have no idea what you're talking about. That's not a very good description. But you say sit on ragweed. I don't know. I don't know. Quite often people will associate chiggers with Queen Anne's lace. But that's just because of the proximity of the two. All right, as we move forward, vertebrates are animals with backbones and are one of the 5 common grouping that pests are divided into. So we're talking about vertebrates. To reduce pest resistance problems, avoid using the same pesticide year after year in the same place. And it can go a lot greater detail than that. In this slide it says year after year. Pest resistance is becoming a greater problem with our newer generation of pesticides. And as we look on pesticide labels, you're going to find a notation that says pesticide grouping. And the scientists have come to the point of actually grouping families of pesticides within a general classification. And if we're dealing with a disorder like downy mildew on your lilac bush, well, let's go to a grape because you don't spray lilacs that much. But downy mildew or powdery mildew is a major problem on grapevines. And assume that I decide to spray my grapes with a material called Abound, which is an excellent fungicide. And we spray the Abound on the grapevines and assume we kill 90% of the colonies of powdery mildew with a single application of Abound. That tells you that 9 out of 10 of the colonies of powdery mildew were subject to annihilation with the Abound. But assume that you decide to spray again next week using Abound again. Now, the population of powdery mildew that was remaining was resistant to Abound. That was not killed. So you have a population that has been multiplying. And if you spray Abound again, it in theory is not going to be effective on that population that's there. So by that theory, you want to what we call rotate your chemistries. In other words, you want to select another material that is effective against powdery mildew that is of a different chemical family than what Abound was. And that's just a real quick quick summary of way to avoid pesticide resistance. But we're dealing with that every year, and that's something that growers have come to recognize as a major problem, major concern as we deal with pesticide resistance. It's become harder and harder to get newer chemistries or new pesticides registered because of the cost that's involved. It's extremely timely and costly to get new pesticides. So we want to take advantage, make sure we can continually use the ones that we have. Environmental protection is important. Possible causes of water contamination include spills, leaks, back siphoning. All right. Spills and leaks, you understand. Does everybody know what a back siphoning situation is?
Back siphoning is when you start to spray something or apply something and then it comes back into the thing.
No. You got a little of the idea, but it's not when you're spraying or applying it. This is back siphoning occurs when you're filling your tank and you've got your fill hose down into your spray tank, and you may turn your water off, and that you have had a positive flow going into the tank, and your fill hose is down in there. When you cut it off, instead of the positive flow going in, it begins to create a suction and pull it back. So that's what we're talking about, back siphoning. And the ways to avoid that is to create an air block. In other words, don't let your hose go down into your filler tank, or you have a mechanical device that stops the return of the material into your water source. Not too much of a problem for the majority of us, but if you're filling a spray out of a pond or some sort of reservoir and you cut it off, you could potentially contaminate your pond, and that's what they're concerned with.
Worried about because you have a backflow valve. That's what
it says. Buy only the amount of pesticides that you plan to use in a given year. That's a wonderful statement, but from a grower's and actual application, it's extremely hard to do. And from a grower standpoint, I don't want to go to my pesticide supplier in April or May and spend $15,000 or $20,000 in one pot. Oh, well, that's minimal. But I quite often will do it in $1,000 increments rather than having so much bought at one time. So, but the point of this statement is don't buy more material than you anticipate you using.
So pretty much buy it on an as needed basis.
That's what I do. And a grower cannot anticipate what cards Mother Nature's going to deal you. You may have an infestation of a disease that you didn't anticipate. You may have an incidence of an insecticide that you didn't, or need for an insecticide that you didn't anticipate. So, it's nearly impossible in my eyes. Now, from a extension person or a person that's standing on the outside and it's not their checkbook, it's real easy to make that statement. But I personally feel differently about that. And but for the purposes of this quiz or test that you're going to get, if you have a question about that, that's going to be your approved response. Make sure that, okay? Now, it says dispose of pesticides in empty containers properly. It says try to use excess unusable pesticides in a way allowable with labeled directions. Most of the time that means putting it on the crop that you anticipated to use it for. It says many times these may be sent to a landfill or an incinerator if quantities are small enough. You want to buy what you need and use what you buy is basically what we want to do. So, and the pesticide containers aren't always an issue with a commercial producer. At one time, it was legal to burn the majority of these containers. That's not the case anymore. A lot of them do what?
Chemicals in the air from the smoke.
Well, a lot of them are plastics, and it's illegal to burn plastic containers. So for that reason, you're asked to triple rinse them In other words, if it's a gallon jug, you want to pour all the solution or the chemical out into your spray tank, and you rinse it 3 times and put that in your spray tank, and then you're supposed to have a device that you can puncture that with. Why would you want to puncture it?
So you couldn't reuse it as a container?
Yeah, so you couldn't reuse it to go get gas to put in your lawnmower. You know, that type of thing. And that's the reason for that.
Pesticide, gasoline.
Well, no, that's just one of the things. It says, be familiar with the required PPE needed for the job and in accordance with the label warnings. What's PPE mean?
Personal protective equipment.
Personal protective equipment, absolutely. And it varies with the label, varies with the material you're using. Personal protective equipment. Pesticide incidents that threaten lives should be reported to VDACs immediately. And by law, they must be reported in at least 48 hours. I'll guarantee you that question will be on the test. And it'll be, the question will be in 48 hours, 3 days, 2 weeks, or a month, something of that type. But pesticide incidents that threaten lives, and that's a key part of it.
I'm guessing when it comes to that, though, more often than not, it's better to do it before the 48 hours.
Yeah, that's the limit. Yeah, you need to do it shorter than that. But if it's threatening a life, you know, you need to assist with
Handling it and maintaining it.
well, you need to assist the medical professional to notify them what the potential chemical was that caused the problem. All right, so protective equipment should be cleaned after every use. And that can be kind of cumbersome doing that. So, but that's another question that's going to come up. In case of a pesticide spill, be prepared and plan ahead by having the proper protective equipment on hand. Early pesticide poisoning signs are like the flu. In other words, headache, nausea, sweating, those type of things. You just feel like crap. Before applying pesticide, ask yourself these questions. Is the problem actually caused by a pest? And if so, what kind of pest? That's a reasonable question. If you've got tomatoes in your garden and you go out and realize that there's a problem to the leaves on a tomato, is that a worm that's eating the foliage off your tomato? Or is it your neighbor's goat? Or is it a deer that's coming? And it's going to greatly affect your actions as how you determine what kind of pest it is. If it was a worm, you need to spray. If it was your neighbor's goat, you need to make sure he puts it in the pen. If it was a deer, you need to check your fence or do some sort of remedial action to eliminate the deer from there. So, is the problem severe enough to warrant chemical control? So if it's worms eating your leaves off your tomatoes, if it's just one vine at the end of the row, you may want to look for that tobacco worm that's eating the leaves. It may just be a single green hornworm that's doing it. But if it's over the entire half-acre tomatoes that you've got, you're going to warrant some kind of chemical control. Is the temperature high enough to get adequate results? A lot of the chemicals that we deal with will have a range, an acceptable range, and it'll tell you that, you know, make sure that your temperature is 50 degrees above before you apply this particular chemical. And it may tell you that it's, you know, not to apply it if it's above 85 degrees. There's generally a range on those things. What stage will a pest be best controlled? As we talk about different pests, we've used an assortment of different examples. Talking about mites, mites are really hard to control. You'll find them on apple leaves and strawberry leaves. And adult mites require a different type of control than what if you've got just a population of the eggs of mites. So one of them is a lot easier to control than the other. So, never use more pesticide than is recommended on the labeled rate. This is something that I've had some experience with when we sold chemicals at home. The recommended rate for 7, for example, is a pound per 100 gallons. And quite often we'd have people come in and say, I've got a horrible population of Japanese beetle. Said, want some 7 to kill them. And as they leave, she says, I'm going to really fix them this time. Instead of using a pound per 100 gallons, I'm going to use 3 pounds per 100 gallons. That recommended rate was there for a reason. A pound per 100 gallons of 50% 7 will control Japanese beetle without damaging your beans that you were going to spray. If you put in 3 pounds of 50% 7 to spray your snap beans, that amount of pesticide, insecticide, will burn the foliage on your beans. So it says never use more pesticide than is recommended. And there's a reason for these rates. So clean empty containers immediately to avoid residue. When you're putting a liquid pesticide into a tank, you pour the last of it in, it tells you to clean the empty containers. You want to triple rinse that then. If you just lay it over in the pile and let it sit there and you come back, 6 hours, 12 hours, or the next day and you try to rinse that out, that stuff, the residual of that has dried in there. And it's by nature supposed to stick to where it's dried. And it's nearly impossible to get that residue out. So you want to clean these empty containers as soon as you can. Certified applicators must keep their application records of restricted use materials for at least 2 years. Guarantee this question will be on test. Guarantee it. And the key is restricted use materials. And it says 2 years. Now there may be a question in there talking about general use pesticides and how long you're supposed to keep the record. There's no requirement that you have on general use pesticides. Okay?
Because that can be used by literally anyone.
Literally anybody, any Tom, Joe, and Harry that can walk in and can purchase it. All right, we've talked about this one. An adjuvant is the chemical added to a pesticide formulation or tank mix to increase its effectiveness or safety. The example that I've used with an adjuvant is assume that you're going to spray the cabbage in your garden and you've got a 3-gallon sprayer and you're concerned about cabbage worms or the loopers that will eat the foliage on your cabbage. And you're just going to spray 7 on there to control those worms. Wonderful recommendation, wonderful use of the material. But if you just put 7 in the tank with water, that's going to beat up and run off your cabbage just like you just waxed your car and you try to spray water on it. It's going to just beat up. It just will not wet that cabbage leaf. You can put an adjuvant in that chemical tank, in that tank with the 7, and it will, what we call, break the surface tension. In other words, that little round bead of water that was on the cabbage beforehand, you put the adjuvant in there, it's going to flatten that water out and enable it to wet that cabbage leaf. So an adjuvant in that situation could be something as simple as the Joy or that you use to wash your dishes. Just put a squirt or 2 of that in there. Will eliminate that surface tension. I'd be willing to bet that all of you today in classes have used an adjuvant on yourself before you came to school.
Yeah,
Today?
I took a shower.
No, the soap that you use to take your shower.
Jonathan?
If you just spray water on yourself, it's just gonna beat up, run off. But the soap will, in essence, break the surface tension and enable you to wet yourself.
Every Saturday.
Same principle. Adjuvant chemical added to a pesticide formulation or a tank mix to increase its effectiveness. It also says increase the safety, and that's true too, because these globs or round particles or round droplets are concentrated, so it's much safer. Drift is the movement of a pesticide away from its intended site by air. all of you've seen something drift. It'll be just like smoke. It'll drift in the air. So pesticides will do that, and it's a lot greater problem under some circumstances, some weather conditions than it is others. And some chemicals will drift in the air much more than others. There are several fairly volatile materials that will drift and you don't know it.
Have what?
Yeah, well,
A pesticide that is a vapor or a gas, or forms of vapor or gas when applied, and whose pesticidal action occurs in a gaseous state, is a fumigant. Had experience with fumigants when I worked at Tech, and we were taking care of the greenhouse up there, and we would have a wide array of different types of specimen plants, and then we'd get in invasions of white flies or mealybugs or something. We couldn't spray a lot of stuff on them because those plants were sensitive to any of the chemicals we could use. But we could use a fumigant, in other words, emit a gas in there that would penetrate the entire house and in theory, eliminate those pests. Some people will use fumigants in their home now if they've got say they've had a dog in the house and they've got a population of fleas that got in the carpet. You can buy fumigant bombs to emit a gas in your house. You have to leave it for several hours, but then you'll open up the windows and let the gas out after a period of time. That's a fumigant. You're emitting a fume in there. So, all right, leaching is the movement of pesticide in water or in another liquid downward. So if you spray a herbicide on a sandy soil and it rains, it's going to leach downward. Do what, Tyler?
It's gonna leach down into it.
It'll leach downward, yeah. So that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about leaching as opposed to drift and the aerial movement of something. This is water that goes downward.
So leaching is another term for absorption in this case.
No, leaching is going down. Absorb is tied to a soil particle. Okay, and that's a good question, but and I'm glad you brought it up. But leaching is a free movement downward.
Okay.
Now, rinsate is the pesticide-containing water that results from rinsing a pesticide container, equipment, or other pesticide-containing articles. So if we're talking about triple rinsing a pesticide container and putting it in the tank, the solution that you get after you've poured it out and you rinse out your tank is the rinsate. That's what's going back into the tank. Regularly searching for and identifying and assessing the number of pests that potentially damage your crop is called scouting. In areas of larger agricultural production areas, scouting is a wonderful profession. I know of a lot of folks that are paid scouts that will, out in the Midwest, they'll have large acreages of corn, wheat, and soybeans, and folks are just paid to ride around and walk through fields and look for potential problems of diseases or insects. These guys are called scouts. That's all it is. It's just regularly searching and identifying. But you got to be able to identify the insect and then be able to determine the numbers. I've seen scouts that were paid to assess the number of alfalfa weevils that were affecting an alfalfa crop. Alfalfa weevil's a little small moth-type critter, sort of a cross between a moth and a wasp, and they'll go through with nets and sweep nets across the top of the alfalfa. And they'll make so many passes, and then they'll open that net up and count the number of weevils that existed. That's a mechanism of identifying, assessing the numbers that are there. A systemic pesticide is a pesticide that absorbs and is circulated by the plant or animal so that it becomes toxic to the pest that feeds on it. So the way to remember this is systemic, system. The pesticide gets into the system, whether it be the animal system, the insect system, the system of the tomato vine. It gets in there and it circulates through the entire plant. We have used to get a few systemic insecticides that we would spray on the apples, and they were wonderful tools to use because you just spray it on the leaf. It would be absorbed into the leaf and get into the entire system of the apple tree and affect any of the insects that we had doing there. Not many of those used anymore, but that's what we're talking about. Sometimes they're systemic insecticides that are put on the soils underneath large landscape trees. It'll be put on the soil, it'll leach down into the root system, be picked up by the root system, and then it's translocated throughout the entire trunk and canopy to eliminate any insects that they're designed to get. A volatile pesticide evaporates rapidly and turns into a gas or a vapor. Command is an example of a volatile pesticide that's used to control weeds in tobacco. An example of it's not a pesticide, but a volatile material that I'm sure all of you had some experience with today would be the gasoline that you put in your automobile. It's extremely volatile. It'll evaporate quickly and goes into the air. You can see the fumes of gas as you fill in your vehicle. Abbreviations for formulations. Now these can get cumbersome, and they're listed in the textbook, and I would recommend that you familiarize yourself with them because there's a bunch of them. And sometimes they're not what you imagine, and I don't remember how they do that here. An aerosol, it's an A. A bait is listed as the abbreviation is a B. Dust is listed as a D. Dry flowable is a DF. E or EC stands for emulsifiable concentrate. And in the tests that we've done, I've gotten a little of everything for some of these things. People make up stuff that's hard to believe. Flowable is an F. And these abbreviations for these formulations are found on all sorts of chemical labels. G is a granular. A lot of the materials that are used on lawns are in a granular formulation. P is a pellet. A lot of the materials that we use to control rodents, rats and mice, are formulated in a pellet of some sort. W or WP is a wettable powder. A lot of the old school formulations of fungicides were listed as wettable powders. Wettable powders are dry, finely ground formulations similar to dust, but are mixed with water. It says, can you imagine how well dirt and water mix? So that's what we're talking about. Wettable powders settle out quickly, therefore require constant agitation in a spray tank. And that's a wettable powder quite often is a formulation that has got the active ingredient formulated on some sort of carrier, and quite often it's talc, which is what they're talking about with dirt. It's a granular type of finely powdered material. So now there's a blank shot. Let's see what we get. Signal words, and these will be on your test, I'm sure. You've got the skull and crossbones, which is a poison, and it's highly toxic. Well, we don't want it to kill you, Tyler, but it has the potential. It's highly toxic. All right, the signal word danger is highly toxic. So we're talking about poison is highly toxic, the skull and crossbones highly toxic, danger is highly toxic, but there are levels. The term warning is moderately toxic. If you see the warning on the label, it's not as bad as those two above you. The word caution means that it's slightly toxic. But those in the column on the left-hand side are your signal words. What's on the right-hand side means your acute toxicity. Now, you didn't know they had my picture in here, did you?
Of course, our mic is muted, so we didn't hear that.
Formulation.
Oh, no, because he can't hear us because of the. when he
I
said-
can now. I turned it over.
Oh, okay. Okay, so they were laughing at the picture, your comment about it. So
Well, that's all right.
Oh, no, she was.
yes, Carolyn was.
Carol, that's okay. The truth hurts, and I
In
understand.
a nice way, because it was cute.
But, you know, that is the PowerPoint that the local extension agents will use to provide the instruction for the test that you guys are going to be enjoying next week. And I've been fortunate to have that for the last several years. Our local agent sent it to me, and I've been really amused at it. A couple of times she's lost it and had to call me and won't know if I had it and could send it back to her. So that's one of the advantages of me saving everything on my computer. But have you got any questions? Did we fail to explain anything that was brought up in there?
What was the other term? The scouting, and then you had another vocabulary word which I was trying to find. It's similar to scouting.
I don't know what it would have been.
I'll have to look it up.
Or you can watch your recording again.
Yeah,
Just,
and I was.
Yeah, it'll be on Blackboard. It'll be uploaded. And
Yeah, it'll be on Blackboard so you can get it.
okay.
Since Tom has recorded this, I started to say I could send this whole PowerPoint to you, but it's pretty cumbersome to do because it's quite long. But through what we've done here with recording the Blackboard, you should have access to all of that information. And if you just go through and review it, before you take the test, and for our folks, it's going to be Monday, the 20th at 10:30. Okay. And Melanie will be here for that. And I will grade the ones that you take, and for the purposes of a grade, we'll have it here, and then she will take the answer sheets and hold them because she's got several more of these things she's got to do, and she'll send them all together to Richmond sometime in January, and you'll be notified of and get your pesticide license. So, okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And if you've got any questions about it, in the meantime, be sure to email me or pull my chain in some way. I'll try to help you with it. I've done this thing so many times. I catch myself assuming that I have told you something, and I don't want to do that. So it's real easy to do. But if you all don't have any additional questions or bits of agony, I'll call it quits and let you go. Tom's got things he needs to do, and I need to go work on my meeting agenda.
yeah, right.
All right.